More phone calls coming up. 877-3DP Show. Stat of the day is always brought to you by Panini America, the official trading cards of the Dan Patrick Show. Jason Garrett, Football Night in America analyst, former Cowboys coach, and Notre Dame football analyst back on the program. How often would players show up not in shape when you were the head coach of the Cowboys?
Not very often. The off-season program changed a lot through the years. If you think about 2011, they started shortening the off-season programs. Relative to the days of Jimmy Johnson back in the 90s, we were in that building on March 1st, Dan, and you were able to lay a great foundation for the off-season. We ran and lifted and did all that for 2 months before we even thought about touching a football. And those days are long gone. And I do think in a lot of ways we miss those days because the foundation that you lay for yourself physically to get ready for 16, 17 game NFL season is critical. And I think that's changed a little bit. But I do think guys take care of themselves. I do think guys know what's at stake. What I get a little concerned about is they're not necessarily working out long enough together in the off season in a competitive environment with other NFL players. So the degree to which they're in shape is a little bit of a concern to me. And I think it's not quite as good as it used to be because of the structure of the off season.
Were you with the Cowboys when Jimmy was talking about if a player falls asleep in a meeting that he'll cut him? And I'm paraphrasing. And then somebody said, well, what happens if Troy Aikman falls asleep? He goes, well, I'd go over there and wake him up. So he wouldn't be. So he had different rules for different people.
Well, that was the real thing. John Roper was a linebacker we had with the team, and we signed him during the season, and he fell asleep in a meeting, and Jimmy cut him. And, but prior to that, he had talked to the team. I'll never forget it. He stood in front of the team in a team meeting and said, hey, guys, you guys don't understand. Everyone's on a spectrum here. I don't treat everybody the same. I don't treat everybody equally. Guys who have been here for a long time and have skins on the wall and have helped us win championships, they get treated differently than a guy who just showed up. Troy Aikman gets treated differently than a third string, guard who's trying to hang on by a string. He hasn't done anything yet. And to me, it's the first time I've ever heard a coach ever say something like that, but it's true and it's honest. And certainly you want to be consistent. You want to have a standard that you hold everybody to, but someone who has some history with you and has some pelts on the wall, I definitely think you treat them a little bit differently. And Jimmy was honest with us, and I think everybody understood it.
And were you there when he came up with the value system of draft picks, and when you were acquiring picks or trading picks, like the numerical value to those picks?
Yeah. I got there in '92, the first Super Bowl year, and Jimmy had been there. I guess that was his fourth year. So he showed up in '89, and that happened prior to me being there. And I think it was Jimmy and a guy named Mike McCoy, who was one of Jerry Jones's business partners in the oil and gas business for years. And they're the ones who came up with it together. And it's amazing how that became the language and the currency of draft rooms across the NFL for so long. And, Jimmy was a really, really smart guy. I never worked with him as a coach. I was a player, he was a coach. So I wasn't privy to a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. But everyone talks, marvels at how smart he was to be able to come up with something like that and be able to translate the evaluation of a player and the draft into those terms.
Talking to Jason Garrett, Football Night in America, former Cowboys head coach. Help me understand what Jerry Jones, the message that he's sending to Micah Parsons.
Well, for me, in this day and age, independent of the Cowboys, the salary cap is going up. And when you have players on your team that you believe are cornerstone players, my philosophy, my thought was always, let's sign these guys now. The price is only getting higher. A few years ago when Kansas City signed Patrick Mahomes to that, whatever it was, a $500 million contract, everybody was like, "Oh my God, that's ridiculous." It's a bargain. It's a bargain now. They were ahead of it. They took a preemptive strike, and it seemed aggressive at the time, but they're getting that guy for what I would consider below market value. And Jerry has had a philosophy that he likes to wait on these things. And unfortunately, when you wait, the price goes up. Myles Garrett signs, then TJ Watt signs, and all of a sudden Micah Parsons says, "Hey, I should be making that because my stats are this relative to them," and all of that. So it's just something, it's an approach that he's taken for years. I was always an advocate of being ahead of it and making the preemptive strikes, assuming that you believe in the player, assuming that you think he is a cornerstone player for you. He represents everything you want in the organization, and he's extremely productive. So I got to believe they want Micah Parsons to be with them for a long time, and I would think that it's better to try to get it done sooner rather than later.
Okay, but Dan Orlovsky, Ross Tucker, in fact, Ross Tucker last hour, feel like Jerry loves the publicity that he gets with this, that, this is free advertising for the Cowboys, that SportsCenter is leading with Micah Parsons, that, he loves that. And you can almost become addicted to that. I don't know what role you think that plays in his negotiation game.
Well, he's a master marketer. I think we all know that. And his impact on the popularity of the NFL cannot be overstated. You and I both know his impact on TV deals in the 90s, his impact on marketing stadiums, and how that's made a lot of owners, a lot of coaches, a lot of players a hell of a lot of money for a lot of years. So he certainly gets that part of it. I don't think that's the driving motivation, because if it wasn't Micah Parsons, it would be something else with the Cowboys, right? ESPN always leads with the Cowboys, whatever the situation is. So I don't think that's a driving force necessarily for him. Maybe it's a byproduct of the approach he's taken, but he typically likes to wait on these things. He typically likes the player to come to the owner and sit down and talk and say, "Okay, how do we want to do this?" He doesn't like to talk to agents necessarily about contracts. He likes to get to the point where Zach Martin or Tyron Smith or Zeke Elliott or Des Bryant, they sit down together and they figure it out. And that's not to say that the player goes in there uneducated, but Jerry just likes to have that individual relationship with the guy. And he's done that forever. He did it with Deion Sanders and Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin and all the guys back in the 90s. So it's just an approach that he takes. My concern is the more you wait, the more you pay.
But he knows that, though, Jason.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant businessman.
Yeah.
And we all say the same thing. It's going to cost you more. He waited for Dak, and, that was the first Sunday of the NFL season, got that deal done. So he knows, he's repeated this. He does this. That's what I just don't understand the logic of, I'm going to pay more money. Okay? He's going to sign Micah Parsons, right? He's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL history. It's going to happen. He was going to sign Dak Prescott. He was going to sign CeeDee Lamb. I don't understand the logic here of a guy, who's a billionaire.
Yeah, maybe he thinks he's going to get a better deal the more he goes.
But he doesn't get a better deal.
Yeah, and maybe he wants to see more evidence. I'm just throwing those things out there, but I think you and I both know that it's probably better to get these guys signed earlier than later.
Give me the team that you're curious about this season, either good or bad.
I'm curious about Washington. I just think they did a remarkable job last year. If you think about where that organization had been for so long, and it started at the top. It started with their owner, Daniel Snyder. There were a lot of really good coaches who went through there, a lot of really good players who went through there, and there were just so many obstacles to their having ultimate success. So Josh Harris comes in there and cleans the slate, and then he brings Dan Quinn in, which I thought was a tremendous decision. a guy who can truly build a culture and get a group of players and coaches and an organization working together the right way. And then obviously they get Jaden Daniels. So, the leadership in that organization from top, from the ownership to the head coach to the quarterback, I think is really, really good. But it's hard to do what they did. And so, everyone always says, hey, you regress to the mean. I don't know if you do. I don't know if you don't. But I like what they're doing there. Philadelphia obviously is the best team in that division. They're the best team in the NFL going into this thing. But I'm just curious to see if they can maintain it. And I'm betting on them because I really love the leadership and I like the team they're building.
Back to doing it correctly when it comes to contracts. I mean, the Eagles have been ahead of the curve. Like they do it, just like you were saying, they do it early. They don't. Howie Roseman does not mess around. He's like, that's our guy. We're going to sign him. We're going to sign him. And they got bargains with some of these guys.
Yeah, they have been masterful. They really have. And, having played them for years, being in the NFC East, as a player and as a coach, they've always been tough. They've always been a really good team. Andy's teams that he had were phenomenal year after year. And then certainly, recently with the couple Super Bowls they've won. But, I think maybe more than anything else, the most significant factor in all of that has been Howie Roseman, how they've built the teams. They're right in their evaluations a lot. Whether they're drafting at the top of the draft, middle of the draft, end of the draft, whether it's a free agent signing, they're really, really good at the evaluation of the player. And then, like you said, they're constantly ahead of it. They're letting the one guy go. They got the new guy coming in. They've been right on the new guy. Think about their defense last year, the number of young players they had. You have to be great evaluators to be able to do that. And they've done it time and time again. And that obviously contributes to your ability to let guys go and be healthy under the salary cap. And they've been the best in the league at it.
Do you want to play starters in the preseason if you're a head coach?
I do. It's
because I wonder
football.
about this. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like, to your point, getting together as a team and being able to practice. Belichick would talk about, Brady talked about, they kind of treated the first couple of games of the regular season like that was their preseason. The Bengals always get off to a slow start. I don't know if you change your philosophy and maybe you put added importance on the preseason games here. So I guess it's coach by coach, but
I'm such a big fan of preparing. And we talked about it earlier with the off-season programs. I get a little concerned when you have a 9-week off-season program and you're not doing a lot of physical training together and you're doing some real light spring practices. And then you get into training camp and you have ramp-up periods. You don't have a lot of padded practices and you don't play anybody in the preseason. And then all of a sudden in week one, you say, okay, here we go. And the mentality of the players is such that they're elite competitors. And I just wonder if they're truly ready to compete at the level that they're going to try to in that first week and the first few weeks. If you hadn't hardened them enough and they haven't calloused enough with their training and with them getting ready to play pro football. So we always believed in a ramp-up period. We typically play our starters 6, 8, 10 plays in the first preseason game. Some guys, if they had an injury or something, you keep them out of it. But the next preseason game, there's a progression. You play 12, 15 plays. And by the time you get to that week one, it's not a completely new experience. You've blocked people, you've tackled people, and you're ready to go. And like I said, you're hardened a little bit, you're calloused a little bit. And I think that gives you a little more confidence, too, as you move around there and you compete and play.
Topic of conversation yesterday on sports radio, Nick Saban maybe going back into coaching and coaching in the NFL. So just speculation here. Your thoughts on that possibility of going back into coaching and going into the NFL?
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Dan, but my first coaching job was with Coach Saban. I was the quarterback coach in Miami. So I just retired
Oh,
from playing with the Dolphins, and 2 weeks later he gets hired, and I was his quarterback coach. So I was with him in that NFL experience, and it was an amazing experience for me. I learned so much from him, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Um, in the middle of it, I think he realized that in the NFL you get one first round pick a year. And then if you go to a place like Alabama, you can get 10. And and if you get 10 one year and you win a national championship, you're going to get 12 the next year. And so he believes strongly in being relentless in recruiting and building, teams and knowing that at the college level it can perpetuate itself. Where in the NFL, if you have success, it goes the other way. You pick later, you have to pay guys more, all that kind of stuff. So I would think I would bet against that. If you're asking me, I say Coach Saban does not do that. I think he would do well. I believed he was going to do well in Miami before he took the Alabama job. But, Miss Terry is a very influential person in his life at this point. So, like he always says, I'm just going to go up to the lake. He's probably enjoying his time at ESPN and enjoying some time at the lake.
okay. But were you there when they bring in Dante Culpepper and you bring in Drew Brees, and the Dolphins decided to go with Culpepper, and Brees, I guess, physically wasn't, he was a question mark. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I was the quarterback coach at that time.
Did you make
And
the
an amazing,
decision that you said, let's go Culpepper over Brees?
no, it was an amazing experience on so many different levels. I could write a book about this. Um, Drew Brees is something else, and he was an amazing college player, as we all know. And initially in San Diego, had his struggles, but he started to emerge as the guy. And I think we saw that, and we're excited about it. But we were all in on Breeze, and then ultimately there was a medical decision that said he's got a 75% tear of his rotator cuff, and he wants $8 million guaranteed, and we're not doing it. So it kind of became out of our hands. But he was so much fun to visit with. I'll never forget. We picked him up. We took a plane to New Orleans. We picked him up, brought him to Miami, and just had a hell of a time with him. And it was one of those things where you have to respect the injury, but if you were betting on a guy to be able to overcome an injury, he's the guy that could do it. And obviously he was able to do it. He only threw for 80,000 yards after the surgery. So he was something else. And there was a good story about that. We went to dinner with him, and Wayne Huizenga was the owner of the team. And I'll never forget it. Wayne sat next to him and his wife at dinner. And I never forget him saying to me afterwards, I'm out of the football evaluation business, but I'll tell you what, I'm betting on this guy. He's something else. And so for him to make that evaluation just based on visiting with Drew Brees tells you a lot about both those guys. And then we were there ultimately when we signed Dante, and Dante was an amazing player, but his movement was such a big part of his game. And after he had the knee injury, he really couldn't move, and it was harder for him to play the way he was capable of playing before. So obviously that didn't work out real well for any of us.
Great to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, always enjoy it.
Thank you. That's Jason Garrett, Football Night in America analyst, also Notre Dame football analyst as well. Yeah, you look at the careers that were changed. NFL history was changed by going with Dante Culpepper instead of Drew Brees. Who knows how much longer that Saban would have stayed with the Dolphins. Drew Brees' career,